Mavs Fans for Life podcast. I'm Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz Makhani. Make sure y'all subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow this podcast, and you see our socials. Follow us on X/Twitter, whatever you call it. Shahnavaz, the Mavericks are in a big 2-game series. They made a dominant statement against the Kings in the first game. They play the Kings tonight. And then we'll also talk about Luka moving up to number 2 in the MVP ladder. Obviously, it doesn't correlate to the voting, but that's still just how the national media, sees the ranking for the MVP award. And then we'll also talk about Jason Kidd, hopeful for extension as the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks. So, Shahnavaz, those are 3 big heavyweight topics.
Yeah, seriously.
Let's start with the first one, which could be the main event, really, because this is a big game tonight. They made a statement that not only made a statement, they blew them out at home.
Yeah.
There wasn't many cowbells ringing. There's a lot of 3 points. The beam was not lit. It was lit for the Mavericks in the locker room right after. But just what was your initial reaction to how they won the game in the fashion that they did win the game? And then what is on your mind for tonight? What do you expect?
I was surprised. I expected a lot more of a hard-fought battle between the Mavs and Kings. When you look at,
it was the heavyweights, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the team that's right in your pathway, right? I mean, that's the team that you've got to win these 2 games to at least hold, at least even up the season series, because that tiebreaker could come into play, and at least then it's conference record and it's not head-to-head record if it does. And with 10 games left, I mean, who knows what can happen. And so you definitely want to have every advantage that you possibly can. But I just was not expecting that. I mean, we know Luka goes off against the Kings. There's the whole Vlade Divac and Luka's dad controversy from the draft in 2018. So he holds a personal grudge against him. But to see, even on a bum Achilles, Luka do what he did, in the first half, and then just kind of take take a side and let Kyrie do his thing. And I think I retweeted something you said, and from our Mavs Fans for Life Twitter, and said, "What are we looking forward to in the second half?" And I said, "Let Kyrie cook," and that's what he did. It was crazy. Like this is a team that we have talked about this for the last couple of weeks, and it's the Mavericks. Clearly, you can see the improvement on the defensive end. The acquisition of PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. It's been talked about time and time again. They're up now, I think, 7th in the NBA in defensive rating, 5th overall in net rating. They're the second best by all numbers, the offensive team in basketball. But we saw this team win 4 games while shooting less than 32% from 3. And we all wonder what would happen if the Mavericks started hitting their threes. If guys like PJ Washington and guys like Tim Hardaway Jr. started just hitting threes that they've been missing. And you saw that.
Yeah.
You saw what happened. I mean, that was not close. Like that game got out of hand really, really quickly. And that's got to put fear into a lot of teams. If you're an opponent and you're looking at the playoff picture, outside of Denver, Landon, like I don't know who the Mavericks can't beat in a 7-game series if they play the way they played against Sacramento. The shot's not always going to fall, but the Mavericks are not going to shoot as bad as they did through the first 4 games of this winning streak. So to see them hit their shots, to see them play defense. Derek Lively might have had the best game of his career defensively, and it won't show up in the stats. But the way he guarded Domantas Sabonis was insane. I mean, the guy just completely swallowed him up. I said before the game, the 2 things that Dallas had to do was contain Sabonis to try to get him under his averages, and limit transition, because that's where Sacramento's really good. And the Mavericks gave up 7 transition points, and I think 5 were in garbage time in the fourth quarter. So the way that they played defense was just outstanding. I didn't expect that big of a blowout, but I think it really put a lot of people on notice. And tonight, if you're Dallas, you got to keep the foot down on the gas, man. You got to come out strong, and you've got to show Sacramento that you're the same team that played a couple nights ago. This is a very easy game for Dallas to come into tonight and just kind of start slow and fall back and kind of let things get out of hand. But Luka rested the entire fourth quarter. Hopefully he's good to go tonight. You got to keep the aggressiveness now with only 9 or 10 games left in the season, especially tonight against Sacramento.
Yeah, I think the Mavericks are going to have a different mindset than that we've seen in the past, kind of like they did against the Utah Jazz. Where now that the game is in a time period where every single game matters, you really have to lock in, especially when you play a game back to back. You play the team back to back on the road. I think that's what was good with the Jazz series. It gave them a preview of how a team feels in the second game after you dominate them in the first game, and they really give you all that they can. Obviously, this is a better team in the Sacramento Kings, but I think they expect it. I think they know it, and I think they feel it that it's going to get the best of Sacramento in the second game, and I think they're going to be ready for them because obviously, like you said, they need to be ready for that so they don't come out just let the Kings hit them first.
Yeah,
because it really matters. This game, they need this game, and they dominated in the first round, the first game. So you have to control on the defensive end. I mean, they held them to 96 points in the first game. That's very impressive. They out rebounded the Kings. That's even more impressive. How Sabonis, how he's so physical, and then their 3-point shot was back. They shot 56.4%, and you really got a lot from PJ and THJ. They were 8 of 12 from the 3-point range. If that even if obviously that was anomaly, but I mean, if you just get 35% from those two, I mean, going down the stretch, you just talked about them winning games when they shoot below that threshold. So imagine if they just, like you said, if they just keep it up, because Exum is going to be consistent. He's been consistent. Derek Jones Jr., he's been up and down, but for the most part of the season, he's been okay from the 3-point range. If you get those 4 shooting great from the 3-point line, that's going to be key for this team to not only move up in the standings and maybe get the 5th seed, long shot 4th seed, but that could be pivotal for them even against Denver. I mean, even against whoever they play in the first round, that could carry them to the top of the league, is the 3-point percentage, and then also their defense and their rebounding, which has been great so far.
Yeah, and we saw it earlier this year. We saw it last year when Dallas doesn't shoot the 3 well. Normally they lose, up until what seems like a month and a half ago, where that completely changed, and it has a lot to do, I think, with Washington and with Gafford, because you've got that athleticism. Dallas, I think, is second, or they lead the league in points in the paint since the trade deadline. So I think, as frustrated as we've been, and you and I have talked about this offline, just talking during games, and it's like, why it's so frustrating to watch Dallas just take a bunch of threes when they're down, and it's like, drive the ball, try to get some easy buckets. And now you're seeing that, even like the games against Utah, when the Mavs weren't shooting the ball well, they'd get the ball inside. Like, they have that. I think there's a trust factor there that you've got Gafford in Washington, and Lively to some extent, who can kind of clean up some of those misses. So if you do drive inside, or you can dump it off to them and they can hit, they can get an easy dunk. You've seen this whole team just kind of change on a dime, over the last 2 months pretty much. And it's just been remarkable to watch, because it's very hard to incorporate 2 new players, 2 new really key rotation players, 2 new starters into your team right off the bat like that. And just the way that they've seamlessly fit, has really given Dallas now an opportunity to make some noise, man. Like we talked about playoff positioning earlier, and it's a little early for that because we're still a couple weeks out. But you start looking at the Western Conference, and you look at teams like the Clippers who are struggling, and you look at obviously the teams still in the play-in, like the Suns and the Lakers, the Warriors, heck, even the Rockets, who could potentially make it. Like, as a Mavs fan, you have to sit there and say nobody really strikes fear into you other than Denver. And to
I
your
don't even
point,
think Denver.
and
If the
exactly to
threes
your
are
point,
falling,
if Dallas is hitting their threes, they just beat them, on a Kyrie Irving, crazy shot, but the defense in that game against Denver was outstanding. You only gave up 107
yeah,
points. So it's not like that was a 144-141 win like it would have been probably 6 months ago. So I think Dallas has a
yeah,
lot going for them as you kind of get in. They're hot at the right time. Momentum, plays a big factor. We saw what happened with Miami last year. So it's too early to say right now, but the way that this team is playing, they're very, very dangerous and very hard to stop.
yeah, and that's why I think even Denver, like I think a couple weeks ago I would have agreed with that Denver than everybody else, but
Mm-hmm.
now in this new stretch that you see with this team, and just like when they played Denver, like you just mentioned, and when they're playing the Kings, and they're playing good teams as well, is you're seeing the ability to not stop, Jokic or these type of players, Sabonis, but they're containing them.
Yeah, because you
Not
can't stop them.
you're not getting the full. No,
Yeah,
you can't stop these type of players, but that's what you're trying to see, especially with the Nuggets, and who knows with Jamal Murray and his health. But I kind of like this team because now with the 3-point falling, with PJ and THJ, if they can get rolling, especially THJ, because the first half I was like, okay, he's in the rhythm, but then you see questionable shots.
I
When
will
he gets
say,
hot, he takes questionable shots.
yeah,
But the second half was good.
I
Second half
thought
was really
I thought the
good
second half was
in the
great.
flow of the offense.
I
Yeah,
think he, to your point, I think he was in a rhythm in the first half, and then I think he tried to keep it going, right, and took some questionable shots, which we've seen him do. But man, I'll tell you, Landon, the last couple of games watching Tim Hardaway Jr., I think he's finally kind of, and maybe it's too early to tell, but in my mind, watching him play, there's a couple questionable shots here or there, um, but his passing has
here or
gotten a lot.
there, it's
Well,
consistent.
more here than
When he
there. I'll say that. Um,
when
but
he's hot,
his
he
passing's gotten
chucks.
his passing's gotten a lot better. Like the way he's playing
Yeah,
within the offense has gotten a lot better. I don't think you're seeing him take too many pull up threes. Now it's normally in rhythm and he's just missing them. And yeah, he takes some questionable shots. I understand that. It's just the player he is. It's never going to change. But to
yeah.
see him kind of more and more as these games go on, he's finding kind of his rhythm within the offense itself to be a facilitator and to drive inside. He's passed up a couple threes to get inside and get fouled. Like you've got to appreciate that, because he's at least doing everything he can to help this team win at that point.
No, I do appreciate it. He has 10 assists in the last 2 games,
That's awesome.
and guess what? And that's because he had to.
Yeah,
Because now he's playing 20. He had 26 minutes against the Kings, and he had 29 minutes against the second game against the Jazz. So he's starting to learn you have to play within the team to be successful. Because when he was doing that and just chucking up shots, it worked at the beginning of the season because he was making them.
yeah,
But now those heat checks take the team out of the rhythm because you still have Kyrie on the floor. Like you still have, like when he was doing that, there were a lot of injuries. He had to do that. But
yeah,
now you still have a full roster except Green, who's eventually coming back real soon. You have to make sure you pass the ball and turn down a okay shot, and then you'll get the ball back for a great shot. And that's what makes a winning team, because this is the first time he's really played with the Mavericks on a team that you can see doing damage in the playoffs. He got hurt in the Western Conference Finals.
yep.
And what other team have you seen him like really play this way and have this big of a load for a winning Mavericks team?
Yeah, and
Except
even
when he's catching fire like now.
yeah, and even his previous stops in Atlanta and New York, like he was never playing on winning teams or playoff teams. So this is relatively new for him. This isn't something that he's done before, to your point. And I think people forget that he didn't play in the conference, in that playoff series against Utah and Phoenix a couple years ago when the Mavs went to the conference finals. So yeah, I mean, look, if he's playing the way he is now, the last couple of games, I mean, I really I like what I'm seeing from him. Obviously, we've talked about PJ Washington. It looks like he's getting his stroke back. If the Mavericks just got to keep doing what they're doing, man, like I'm really, really impressed, especially, the Denver game. Yeah, beating Denver was great. And Kyrie's shot is going to live on forever because that thing was nuts. But even the wins against Utah, when you're not shooting the ball well and you still win, like that's what you want to see as a Mavs fan, because this team's for so long this year and last year lived and died by the three, and you could see it. You could see the frustration boil over to the defensive end, and now it's like the Mavericks are getting back on defense even in transition, and they're playing much better defense. If the three is not falling, they're not just jacking up a bunch of threes hoping they'll go in. They're starting to get the ball in the paint, and there's a trust factor there with Gafford and Lively that I think wasn't there before the season started or before the trade deadline, where the Mavericks felt comfortable being able to go inside and just hand it off to one of your centers and let them do damage. PJ Washington's little hook shot in the paint is like it's beautiful to watch because it goes in like 90% of the time. But even he, like, when his shot's not falling, he's driving inside. Like, I love it. As a Mavs fan, you got to love it because this team can beat you in a bunch of different ways now.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why tonight is so pivotal for this team, because if you lose this game, no matter how great the Mavericks have done, they're 9-1 in the last 10 games. But if you lose this game, depending upon how the Suns do, you could finish the night back in 8th place.
Yep.
So that's why it's really a gauntlet. I mean, just this 2-game series with the Kings is really how you can move down the stretch of the schedule, and I'm curious to see how the Mavericks do, just specifically in the first quarter, because I hope PJ Washington gets that confidence. Obviously, he's always confident, just from talking to him and seeing him. But like he has, that 3-point range, like, that gives him confidence. Like, that gives him confidence that they're going to go in when he shoots them. And like you just mentioned, his floater game, his short game around the rim is beautiful to watch. He is probably up there with the best on the team. I know Kyrie, Luka, but it's just as good, the floater game and the hook shots. So I just want to see him catch fire early with the 3-point range, and then that would set up the rest of how the game is going to go. Because obviously you saw it when the Mavs started hitting those threes, they slowly just built the lead, and then all of a sudden the game was over.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm curious to watch, just that. And then obviously Lively and Gafford to continue the physical presence. I'm glad that they let Lively play finally, because he's a rookie. So he's been, the first half of the season, he was getting those fouls because, hey, he's a rookie. Give it to the veteran against him. So now you can see the potential in which you see it obviously already, but just allowing him to play, or even in the playoffs when they don't call those calls, that's going to be great to watch him and Gafford just going at it with the other bigs.
And I'll say it again, his defense against Sabonis was the best. That was the most impressive thing I've seen from him all year. I mean, we know about the lob game. We know about his, his ability to block shots, and he's had some great games in the past. I think that was his best game defensively. Like, to be able to lock down Sabonis, and Sabonis was trying to bully him, like you could tell, and there were a lot of offense, there were a lot of fouls that weren't called. The refs, I think, are letting these players play now. And Lively held his own, and you've got to give him credit for being, that young of a guy going up against a guy who should have been an all-star this year, like you've said, to hold your own against him and really, hold him to what? It was something like 15 or 12 points, something like that, for a guy who averages 20, like, it was phenomenal. I mean, that was the best I've seen out of him.
All right, Mavs, win your game, do it again. I said,
And
Do it again.
nobody did the Mavs any favors the last couple of days with Phoenix beating Denver and all the play-in
That's what.
teams winning. I mean, it's just like you just got to take care of business on your own, man. Like nobody's gonna help you out.
Nope. That's why you got to win because like you said, the Clippers won, the Pelicans won their last game, the Suns won their last game. They played tonight, and then you have the Lakers winning their last 5, the Warriors won their last 2, and then the Rockets won their last 10. So that's gonna be a good game too. The Suns played the Thunder,
Yep.
which is going to be an incredible game. The Clippers played the Magic, which is going to be an incredible game. So
And Dallas
Lakers,
next 2 games aren't cakewalks either. You've got to play the Rockets and the Warriors. So I mean, this is
yeah.
you got to win all these games.
Well, that's what I'm saying because let's just say the Mavs have a hot streak and it continues. They're already on the 5-game win streak, 9 of the last 10. If you win these next 3 games, you could probably be 5th or 4th after those games. But if you lose, you could be 8th or probably 9th.
Yeah, you
if
could
you go on a
easily be
losing streak.
right in the middle of that play-in.
The Lakers are up there too. Yes. So okay, so tonight's a big matchup. So we'll stay tuned for that. Let's talk about Luka finally moving up the MVP ladder on NBA.com. And Luka jumped over Giannis because last week he was tied with Giannis for 3rd, and he jumped over SGA for 2nd place on the MVP ladder. And that's huge because we've talked for the past couple months on how Luka can top the favorites of Jokic and SGA. What was your thoughts on that?
I'll go back to what I said last time we talked about it. If the Mavs just have to keep winning, I mean, Luka's going to put up his numbers. The only reason he wasn't in consideration was winning. I mean, to be quite honest, that's what the voters are looking for, unfortunately, because now this year they feel like they can't give it to a lower seed, even though they've done it with Westbrook and Jokic in the past. But that's fine, whatever the case is. I said it before. The Mavs just, if you keep winning, I don't know if he can overtake Jokic. But if the Mavericks just keep handling their business and doing what they do, he's going to finish top 2. Like he's got the numbers to finish. He's got the numbers, honestly, to be number 1. He should be leading the MVP race. But I think because the Mavs are kind of teetering on this line of in the playoffs, or in the play-in, it's kind of, I think there's reservation there in terms of where the vote is. If the Mavs move up to 5th or 4th, you can have a real conversation that Luka should win. Like there's real consideration there that, like, let's say if the Mavs go 4-1 their next 4 games, and Denver drops. I mean, Denver's schedule isn't a cakewalk. They've got to play Minnesota tonight. They've got Cleveland, who's a top 4 seed in the East. Then they've still got games against the Clippers and another game against the Wolves upcoming. So, it's not a cakewalk schedule for them, and it isn't either for Dallas. But Dallas, after they face the Kings, Rockets, and Warriors, then the Mavericks are pretty much, they've got the Warriors. Actually, they've got the Warriors and Rockets again. So really, after they've just got to handle their business, to be honest, Landon. Like, I don't know if he's going to overtake Jokic, but I think he's finally getting the credit and the acclaim that he deserves from an MVP standpoint because Dallas is winning so many games.
And this is why I always say winning is too heavily weighted when it comes to MVP voting, and not just winning because you have to win. I'm not saying take that out. I'm saying it should be equal to the other requirements to become a MVP for that season. But it seems like it's always like 40% or 50% of the voting is what seed are you? Because when you really look at it big picture, the Mavericks are a top 10 team record wise right now. I mean, they're playing like a top 5 team, but record wise, they're a top 10 team. So just realistically thinking, if the East were a better conference, that's an MVP vote. If you're a top 10 team, that should be an MVP vote. But they look at seed, even though they're one game, they're like one game behind or 1.5 games behind Pelicans. Two, well, they were closer yesterday. But that's what I'm saying. Like they always look at what seed. Oh, Jokic was 6 seeds, but that's when Rushbrook was a 6 seed, but that's when look at his roster. Look at how many wins they have. 48 wins. The Mavericks have 43 right now, and 10 games to go. You don't think they're going to win half of their games the rest of the down the stretch? Imagine if they win 50.
I was going to say,
imagine
if they get 50 wins, if the Mavs get
that's
to 50
guaranteed.
Wins, they should be. I would assume if they can get to 50 wins, they should be the 4 seed. Like that. At least at minimum
7-3 in the final 10 games.
You go 7-3 because the Clipper schedule. I mean, they've got their Clipper schedule is brutal down the stretch as well. So if the Mavs get if they go 7-3, which is doable, right? I mean, if they've gone 9-1 their last 10, if they finish 7-3, maybe you drop one of the games of the Rockets, you drop, maybe the game to the Heat, who knows? But I think they can handle the Warriors. Maybe they'd lose tonight against Sacramento, but you finish 7-3, and you get to 50 wins where this team was. And you talk about the stretch they've been on. Luka should have that in the bag at that point.
Yeah, don't forget, Kyrie missed like 20 games of the season.
Yeah, I mean, a
lot of the rotation players
worst injury luck of any team this year. Like there was a 2-month stretch where a key rotational piece, if not more, were out, and Luka kept the team kind of floating above water for just treading water until everyone got back healthy. And you've seen now what a fully healthy roster is capable of doing.
Exactly. So that's how I see Luka taking votes away from Jokic. Even Jokic wants people to take votes away from himself. He said Luka deserves the MVP. I've never seen that. A leading candidate says someone else. He doesn't care.
He just wants to be on his farm with his horses, man. I really don't think he cares.
Yeah, he literally said Luka deserves to be the MVP 100%.
Yeah.
And it was like 2 weeks ago. So it was during that game they won the game winner. So it wasn't like the first half of the season. Like this was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that's before, that was like when, that was at the beginning of their stretch, this 9-1 stretch. So it's like, so I think, but realistically thinking the Mavericks for Luka, I'm not thinking like to finish number 2, number 3, like to take votes and actually have a powerful chance, which I think he should. Oh, I've said it, like you said it, but you still think Jokic should be number 1. So that's why I'm trying to convince you as a voter, just since you have Jokic number 1, to take your vote away. I think the Mavericks have to do a few things. They have to finish top 5, preferably 4 to be a guaranteed lock, but at least top 5 in the West, since seeding, no matter how many wins they have, seeding, voters think about seeding, top 5 seed, they have to finish with 50 wins. That would be like, okay, now we're 50 wins. Yeah, we have to look at Luka. Yeah. So 50 wins, top 5 seed, and Luka has to win back-to-back player of the months. So if the Mavs can get these next 2 wins, and he's already averaging a triple-double in the month of March. He had a few games that were bad shooting-wise, but he's still averaging like 45% field goal in, like 36 or something like that from the three-point line. That's in a triple-double. That's like a 30-10-10. I think that should be a player of the month if they get these next 2 wins.
Yeah. If I'm thinking about it from the perspective of a voter, and it's like, okay, right now I would say Jokic. I think you're right. Everything you said, if that happens, I don't know how you can deny Luka the MVP. I don't think it's a good look for Denver when they lose to a Suns team, without Jamal Murray. I think they still should have been able to take care of business against them. I don't think that's a good look for them, but look, Denver's a really good team. They're really, really well coached. I know that seeding and to your point, it sucks because it shouldn't be a part of the consideration, but seeding matters, right? And I think Dallas has to finish at least top 5. And I think it's really interesting. And I think this actually helps Luka's case a little bit, but the fact that he's not, going off and averaging like 36 a game, you're seeing him play less minutes and you're seeing him average like 30, 32, but the team's winning, right? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that is because Luka's, obviously we've talked about the cohesion and the, connectedness of the team, but Luka's getting a little bit more rest every game, not having to play the fourth quarter, not having to carry the load every game. Like, I think when they absolutely need him, in games like Sacramento, you're seeing that show up. I wish voters would look at that aspect of it as opposed to just this is how he scores, this is what their playoff seeding is, etc. But yeah, I mean, Mavs finish top 5 and would get 50. If they get to 50 wins, I think he should be the MVP at that point because the turnaround that this team would have had to get to that spot is remarkable.
And that's why I said I wish seeding would be replaced with wins because the West is so tough.
Yeah.
Like I wish it would be like you have to. I know there's no written rules, but there's like there's hidden requirements. Like I feel like I wish you have to be a top 10 team instead of just saying, because now it used to be a top 6, but now it's like a top 5, top 4 seed, really top 3 the past few years. But I wish it was like you have to have top 10 team in the league, or you have to have at least 48 wins. Like something like that, where instead of we just talk about seeding, because the East, I mean, the Pelicans would be like a 3 seed right now in the East. The Mavs would be like a 5 seed. Like the East is not as good as the West. The West has like so many contenders.
Yeah.
In the East, really, the Bucks have been horrible lately. So the East really only has the Celtics and the Cavs they're so unserious. The Cavs are so unserious.
They're unserious. I don't think I think the Knicks will run out of gas because Thibodeau loves playing everyone 45 minutes a game. The Bucks, man, I'm just like, the Bucks are just so
it's Doc Rivers.
Unserious. I mean, that's the best word. How do you blow that big of a lead, and lose to the Lakers and double?
Their adjustments are
Doc
horrible
Rivers,
too.
Man. Like, dude keeps getting jobs after all he's done, and people still keep hiring him. I'm like, man, this dude must have something on everybody in the league to keep getting hired.
And that's what's crazy because, like, in the NBA now, like a 10-point lead is nothing.
Nothing.
Like,
yeah.
But when you play the Bucks, 10-point lead, you're gonna win. Because like, there's no coming back from that team.
Oh my god, they do it. Okay, TV viewership. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So, Shahnavaz, the last word, the final topic of this episode. Tell us what the someone from The Athletic reported.
Yeah, so
Jason Kidd.
Yeah, I think it's pronounced Amick or Amick. Sam Amick's a great writer for The Athletic. One of their NBA writers had a column that came out regarding Dallas and obviously some of the things that we've talked about, their improvement. Kyrie Irving and Luka. Very interesting quote that he had here in his article that I think definitely garners some conversation. So I'll read this, and this is directly from Sam's article. He says, Doncic, who is in the thick of the MVP race yet again, is leading a team that has been dominant of late. Irving, who gives Doncic much needed balance on the offensive end, is playing beautiful basketball. And Kidd, league sources say, is hopeful that he can secure an extension this summer. And he's signed through next summer. So I thought that was really interesting that you're starting to, leaks, little rumblings around the league that Jason Kidd's looking to get a bump after this year. So what are your thoughts? Landon? I know there's a lot of divisiveness between Mavs fans and Jason Kidd, and I don't think anybody can say anything bad about him right now. I mean, you can nitpick all you want, but I think the job he's done the last couple of months has been great. But what are your thoughts, on him going into next year, either with an extension or it being the last year of his deal?
Well, I mean, it's funny how that comes out. because we just had our episode about Jason Kidd, you
Mhm.
know, just on how he's doing. But you know, I'm impartial with Jason Kidd. I really like to look at the big picture, and not only this season, just his whole tenure. You know, because we talked about this. Like his first season was incredible on what he did. He was making adjustments. He's really good on the fly. He keeps a calm, cool composure, just like Kyrie. I mean, they're born on the same day. So you know they have that same mindset mentality of just keep calm. Um, even when the lows are very low, and even when the highs are very high, just keep calm and focus on the main goal. In you know last year, it was horrible. Like there was no adjustments. He wasn't coaching much. He was kind of you could tell he didn't really like the roster at all. Um,
Yeah.
and he kind of coasted to the end of the season. Um, and then you know this season it's been a lot of injuries. So now that you're seeing him with a healthy team, you're really seeing what Kid is all about. And that's why we applauded him for what he was doing, and we've criticized him for when he has downfalls, and he's really stepped it up regarding not afraid to make a change, especially late in the season when
Mhm.
every game matters. He did it right at the perfect timing too. You know, inserting Gafford and Derrick Jones Jr. I don't think that's emphasized how big of a change that was. You know, because Green wasn't getting over screens, and Derrick
Yeah.
Jones Jr. does a good job at that. Derrick Jones Jr. is probably the second best point of attack defender behind Exum on this team. And then you know Gafford, what he's done, they're 11-1 with Gafford as a starter. So I think that was a big thing. And then obviously what he's done pushing the pace, and then his ATOs, they're the best clutch team.
Yep.
So we talked about what he's done, but just from that report on the extension, I ain't mad at him. You know,
Sure.
but pump your brakes a little bit. Pump your brakes a little bit. Like we talked about, if the Mavs lose a couple games, they could be an 8 seed. They could be an 8 seed tomorrow. So
Yep.
pump your brakes a little bit. I know he didn't say it directly. It's a report on him hopeful, but you know, he has one more year left, right?
Yep.
Is it one more year left?
One more year.
So so I ain't mad at him because he's saying, look what I've done with a good roster, and look what I've done this season with
Mhm.
throughout all the injuries, and look at the relationships I have not only with the players, but with you, Nico, and
Yep.
with the owner, my minority owner now, Mark Cuban, Dirk Nowitzki. And I don't know the dynamics too soon. It's too soon with the new owners, but look at all these people who like what I'm doing, like my philosophy implemented in the team, like my creative freedom that I give the superstars, and like my defensive mindset that I have instilled now that I have the players that I want, you know, with this team. Give me a couple more years. So I ain't mad at him. You
Sure.
know, get a couple more years before something bad happens. You
Yeah.
know, um, so I ain't mad at him, but I want to see what he does down the stretch. At least, of course, playoffs. That's the biggest thing, but at
Mhm.
least down the stretch to position this team. Now that you have no excuses, Green is the only injury on this team, and he's a rotation player. You
Right.
know, like now that you have your starting lineup, you have the most important players off the bench with Lively and Exum back and THJ now that he's rolling. You really have no excuses to in the favorable matchups. They are hard games, but other teams in the West have more difficult games on their schedule.
Oh yeah.
So
100%.
let's see what he does. I just want to say, let me see if I'm Nico. Let me see what you do the rest of the season, because I already have you for another year. I could be like Dak Prescott, you know, in the Cowboys. Let's see what you do on the
Oh boy.
contract year.
Yeah.
But you know, if I'm Nico, let me see what you do down the stretch in the playoffs, and then we could talk.
Yeah. I
What's your
think that
what's your thought?
So I think there's a couple things that go into this, right? I think number one, everything you said about what Jason Kidd has done is correctly, accurate, right? From the Western Conference Finals run to last year to this year, he's improved on a lot of stuff that we've wanted to see this season. And there's still things you can nitpick and say, I wish he was more engaging. I wish he was yelling at the refs more, or whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the
Because
injuries
we
play a
said
part.
this was a make or break year.
We
for
did,
him.
yeah, we
And
did.
Josh Green.
And yeah, and the injuries, certainly didn't help. So I think there's two really big factors. Number one is new ownership. I think that always plays a part in any coaching. We've seen Matt Ishbia come in and fire Monty Williams, just to go get Frank Vogel.
That's
right?
true.
We've seen a lot of owners come in and say, in the NFL, who will come in and say, I want my guys. I'm going to fire the GM. I'm going to fire the coach. I don't care. So depending on, we don't know a lot about these owners. We don't know how much sway Cuban still has.
But Mark Cuban said he has the basketball decisions.
He says that, yes, and I don't doubt that. But when money's involved, and there's a power struggle, it's too early to tell, but that's going to come into play. And then I think that the whole Nico and Kidd being a package deal, I think that plays a part. If in the instance Jason Kidd does get fired, does that mean Nico goes as well? Or vice versa? I think that I don't know how much was made of that relationship and, when they initially, were both hired, and really what the connectedness looks like. So I think that's interesting. I really don't like coaches in kind of a lame duck year, right? You brought up the Cowboys. It's like McCarthy going into this year, right? Like, dude doesn't have a contract extension. It's make or break. Like, we'll see how you do. And then they've got all the leverage to say, well, look, I let you do to the playoffs again. I want this much money. Or, you know what? Screw you. I'm going to take another job. So you run the risk of that. I never like coaches going in to the last year of their deal. Either fire them or give them an extension. Like, that's kind of where I sit. But I think you're going to have to see what Dallas does this offseason. If Jason Kidd gets to the conference finals again, and it's 2 out of 3 years that he's been in the conference finals, he deserves an extension. That's like 100%. He deserves an extension at that point. Like, you can't deny it. If this team, like you said, if in this 10-game stretch, if they go 3-7, Landon, and end up in the 9th seed, or God forbid the 10th seed, and they're or let's say they're the 9th seed, they lose their first play-in game. They got to play one more just to get into the playoffs, and then you got to face Denver first round. And a lot of those losses are dumb mistakes, things that can be cleaned up by coaching. I think, you've got to have a serious conversation about cutting him loose. So I think it's really going to come down to what happens, over the next couple of months.
Cutting him loose?
Maybe not after this year, but next year.
Well, I mean, if that's how you feel, I'm just saying, because
honestly, if somebody comes available, I'm thinking about this when you have to look at the opportunity, right? If, for instance, if you're the Cowboys and you don't know whether to keep Mike McCarthy, but Bill Belichick's available, and let's say Sean McVay was available, Sean Payton was available, and you still stuck with Mike McCarthy, that's a dumb move. Like, you've got to think of the opportunity. If you've got, and I'm not saying Phil Jackson's walking through the door, right? But what if Golden State decides we're going to blow it up and Steve Kerr says, I'm done. Like, I don't want to lead a rebuild. You tell me you're not going to go after Steve Kerr to coach Luka and Kyrie? What about some of these assistants like Kevin Young out in Phoenix, or, you've got Jordy Fernandez out in Sacramento, guys that have relationships with Luka and Kyrie, domestically and internationally, guys that potentially could be like, you just have to assess all your options is what I'm saying. You can't definitively make a statement unless if this team gets back to the conference finals, I'm all for giving him an extension. If they don't, if they don't, let's say if they make it to the semis, they win round 1, maybe you run it back next year and you see what happens. I'm saying the only way he gets fired is if everything just bottoms out. Like, worst case scenario happens for Dallas. Here are these next 10 games and leading into the playoffs. I think that's the only way he's let go. I think the relationship is too good, with Luka, Kyrie, and the team.
Well, that's why I bring this up, because the only The only reason I question that is not because if it bottoms out, I mean, he deserves it just for the last 2 years
Yeah.
together, um, which would be tough after you see the first year. That was incredible. But I'm saying you just brought up relationships, and that's why I'm saying this because Luka and Kyrie want him. So you would
Absolutely.
have to have a tough conversation with your stars who you want to keep for
Hmm.
a long time together, on what they really want. Because if it bottoms out and Luka and Kyrie say, "Hey, let's run it back another year," we still want him because we still, let's just say it bottoms out, they still going to have like 46, 47 wins,
Yeah, and
um,
then you go in next year
it,
with this whole
for a
roster
season
together. Yeah.
with a full year of PJ and Gafford and another year of development with Omax and Lively. I'm just thinking realistically. You go in, and what if your superstars want him? That's a tough conversation to want because you want to appease them to
Yeah.
stay in Dallas for the next 10 years, or
Mhm.
Kyrie next 8 years, or 7, 8 years. Who knows? Um, you want Luka to stay for next 15 or whenever he decides to retire. I'm just saying, that's a thin line to walk on
It
because they're
is.
close with Kid. They're very
Yeah.
close with Kid.
Yeah, to your point, I think it's a unique situation, right? Because this isn't the same as every other franchise where you're not going to talk to your stars about your head coach. And I think they've got to,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like, we see it all the time, people clamoring for Kid to get fired. You get it in your mentions, I get it in mine of like, oh, the only thing wrong with this Mavs win is that Jason Kidd's still the coach. I don't think people realize how close Jason Kidd and especially Kyrie, but also Luka.
No,
I don't
way
understand
closer with
how.
Kyrie. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't understand. I don't think people understand the true nature of those relationships that he has with Kyrie
Yeah.
Irving and with Luka. Like, you have to understand it on
Every
that level to really see. For all say what you want about Jason Kidd as for the and nitpick whatever he does. The dude is praised by players. He's a player's coach. LeBron has praised him.
Of
Kyrie's
course.
praised him. Luka's praised him. He's got the backing of Dirk, of Nico, of Mark Cuban. He's not, and you're right, and I didn't think of that, but he's not going anywhere unless Luka and Kyrie want him out. If they
That's what
they
I'm
want
trying to
him,
say.
he's going to be the coach. It's not going to matter. And
Like
now that I think about it, I could see that happening if the Mavs bought him out.
the
I
new
don't.
owners would have to have a tough
And I think
conversation.
they would keep him. I think if Luke, I think Luka and Kyrie would want to keep him because I think they would take responsibility and say, "This is on us. Like, we need to play better. We've got this isn't on
And
him."
they have. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Every time they had an opportunity to throw Kid under the bus during the lows of this season and last season, they never have.
yeah,
They never have. Even Luka, they never have.
yeah. So I mean,
Even when it was like really bad, he would say, if that's what the head coach, if that's what Kid said, then it's true. Like
yeah,
even when it's low, like that's like you said, people don't realize the relationship that these coaches have with players, and not just Mavericks, like player player coaches. Like like if
yeah.
it's a micromanager or a very X's and O's like Rick Carlisle, it's a tough
It's hard,
thing to get rid of
really
them,
hard.
but you have to, but you have to do what the players. I'm not just saying what your top players want. This is Luka Doncic, and this is Kyrie Irving. Like these are superstars. Like you have to appease what
Yep.
your superstars want, because you want to keep them obviously around and you want to make them happy while they're here, and you want to have a coach that gets the best out of them. That might be X's and O's to some people, some players, and that might be relationship type based, a mentorship type based with players. And I think that's what you see with Kid.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I think you see the benefit. There's benefits and pitfalls to both types of coaches, right? Like we see what a coach like Rick Carlisle can do, and then we see the struggles that players have playing under him. The fighting between him and Luka, like their personalities just didn't mesh, and it was time for him to go. For all the great things he did for this franchise, but if you're not going to mesh with the superstar, you're going to be out looking for a job. Yeah, I mean, Kid and Luka obviously have a great relationship, and I now you mention it, and I didn't think about it. I don't think it's going to take a lot for Luka and Kyrie to be like, okay, we want somebody new to come in, because I think there's a trust factor there.
Yeah.
And not just with them. I think everybody else on the team like relates to Jason Kidd, and they know what a great player he was, and they know what he did for this franchise, and he's got the relationships upstairs. I think he's kind of a I don't even know how to play, but I think they're kind of like the same group, right? He's just kind of like the little, he's part of this whole conglomerate of former Mavericks that work for this organization and that want to, get the Mavericks back to a championship. And he's just the face of that. Unfortunately, everyone else is kind of in the back office, and so I think there's a great relationship there. And
because you always see Sean Marion around.
Yep.
He has a very great relationship with Michael Finley.
Yep.
With
Jet,
like Dirk, you mentioned.
Yeah,
they were talking in the hallway after a game, like Jet, and just all these players. Tyson Chandler, he's always around.
Yep.
Like you mentioned, all these JJ Barrera when he's in town. Just all these former players that played with him, they love him, and it would have to be. I honestly think. Okay, so let me say this. I honestly think if Kidd was not the coach of the Mavericks, with Luka and Kyrie at the helm, I think it would have to be a move that you saw with Detroit Pistons and Dwayne Casey. Like Jason Kidd would be, quote unquote, promoted to the front office, and then they would have a new coach. Like he would be around as the front office guy, kind of like you see Dirk around here. Exactly, where he's promoted, quote unquote, but not fired. He's promoted to the front office, and you have a new coach. Like that, I think that's where you would see him leave, not get fired, because the Mavs are always big on relationships and stuff.
And that's the other thing, right? And I think that stems down from Mark Cuban and hopefully the new owners. That's my concern, is the new ownership. But I think even as owners, like, you're going to do what Luka and Kyrie want to do. Like, you're not going to piss off your 2-star players, So if they want Kidd around, he's going to be here. Like it or not, if you're a Mavs fan, if the relationship Luka and Kyrie have with Jason Kidd, he's going to be here as long as they want him here.
Yeah. All right. So that was our episode, folks. Make sure y'all subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow us. You see the socials, so make sure y'all follow us on X/Twitter. Appreciate y'all tuned in, and we'll see how they do tonight. Goodbye, everyone.